All right, everybody, welcome to Kitchen Sense Lesson 7. So this is all about recipes to the rescue. So in our last few lessons, we learned about some of the things about food production, food waste, being better stewards of the product that we have. In Lesson 6, we talked about how to make sure that in that production process that we're scaling recipes correctly, that we're ordering our food correctly. And we also talked about following recipes correctly. And so in this lesson, I want to spend a little bit more time focusing on what kind of recipes can help us be a little bit more balanced from a health and wellness perspective, but also from a cost perspective. So let's jump into some health and wellness recipes first. So one of the key components to just creating a menu in general is going to be to make sure that you have a balanced menu creation, or that your ideas are balanced, whether it's protein, starch, and vegetables, and the portion size of those. Making sure that, say, like 4 ounces of starch, 4 ounces of vegetable, and 4 ounces of protein, whether or not that's your sort of average or standard portion size, is being followed throughout. So another thing is incorporating some key ingredients that can sort of be health and wellness focused, such as whole grains. Here I've got some tricolored quinoa, a great, very simple grain that you could add. Relatively low cost in the scheme of things once you portion it out and cook it out, but quinoa can be a nice minimally processed grain as well. So also incorporating all the food groups. So you want to make sure that you have some starches, you want to make sure that you have proteins and vegetables and sort of all of the elements that make sort of a complete, well-rounded dish. The framework of recipes is also very important. So when you think about a recipe or recipe creation, you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel every single time. You can sort of have like a general idea, such as like a stir fry. So stir fries can sort of be like a great catch-all, as we call it in the kitchen. You can use any of the vegetables that are sort of available or readily in the kitchen or the coolers. We talked again in Lesson 6 about that cooler dive, or making sure that we're utilizing some of the products that are on hand that need to go out first. And if you remember, we call that FIFO in the kitchen, so first in, first out. Frittatas and omelets are another great way to sort of just utilize things around the kitchen. And then a salad can also be another great way to utilize up not only vegetables but fruits. And then, we can make salad dressings and creative salad dressings out of all kinds of different things. So let's talk about some heart-healthy recipes. So heart-healthy recipes are going to be centered with fresh fruits, vegetables. Again, we talked about the whole grains. Quinoa, a great whole grain. Whole wheat grains can be also a nice addition there to heart-healthy recipes. Anything with minimally processed or monosaturated oils also going to fall in that heart-healthy category, such as like olives or nuts. Low sodium recipes, this can also be one that you'll see in a lot of sort of like the fad or trend type diets, and something that a lot of people are just monitoring in general. So when we're looking at low sodium based recipes, you want to be aware of foods to avoid. So foods to avoid would be things like deli meat, store-bought salad dressings, although they're great. A lot of times if you go check the labels on these, they're going to be very high in sodium. Condensed soups, so things like this, again, although it can be very convenient, you want to be mindful of getting a low sodium option, because again, if you check sort of the nutritional information on the back, a lot of times you're going to see very high sodium levels in some of those. Pre-seasoned vegetables or meat, we talked about some deli meats, but also like pre-marinated meats that you can find from the grocery store. You might think, oh, well, this is a nice convenient way to make meal prep at home a little bit easier, but if you're watching sodium, you want to make sure that you're checking the nutritional labels. And again, I think that's a good thing to kind of just be aware of. What are the nutritional labels, and sort of taking a glance at those labels every time you're looking at a product that maybe you're just not all the way familiar with, especially these pre-prepared type products or pre-seasoned fruits and vegetables, as well as meats. So the next one would be low-fat recipes. So if we're focusing on low-fat recipes, one of the best things that we can do is lean meats. And so the protein is going to be probably one of the #1 sources of bringing fat into a recipe. So utilizing lean meats such as pork and chicken can just be a sort of very simple way to monitor the fat volumes or levels that are in your recipes. So the next thing that we want to talk about is a cost-effective recipe. And I think when we look at the challenge of sort of home cooking or just meal production in a kitchen like this, we talked about cost of goods last week, trying to find that balance between the products that you want to utilize, the high quality ingredients that we want to have in our recipes, but also the cost and being aware of the cost of goods, and really maybe what are the parameters of our budgets personally, or the budgets of the kitchen that we're in for that day or that meal period. And so understanding how to utilize product or procurement in a cost-effective manner can help us create cost-effective recipes. And so utilizing seasonal fresh produce is one of the easiest ways to make sure that you're being cost-effective, because when a vegetable or a fruit such as like this Swiss chard right here is in season, or these kiwis are in season, the cost of this sometimes premium ingredient is going to be significantly less than out of season. So a lot of times you can get these products year round. Manufacturing and shipping has sort of solved not being able to get fresh in season cantaloupe pretty much anywhere in the world at any time, but it's definitely going to be more expensive when your local season is not producing these products at that time. So another let's call it taboo solution is canned or frozen products. Now, I know that canned and frozen doesn't sound like it's going to make great recipes, but there is amazing canned and frozen products that are out there. And again, checking the labels to make sure that the product that you're picking, whether it's canned or frozen, is meeting some of the health and wellness things that we talked about previously. The next one is going to be cheap cuts or imperfect produce. So cheap cuts of meat, you can watch these things, they kind of come into style and they'll be very popular for a little bit, such as like flank steak or even a hanger steak. A few years back, those were cheap cuts of meats, and now they're actually premium cuts of meats. And you'll see that these things kind of go through a seasonality. But being aware of what are some of like the cheap cuts of meat that are in the store right now, and then what are some of the recipes that I can do to utilize that. So, for example, you might have a short rib that's relatively inexpensive because it's hard to cook. Well, if we have a recipe that tells us how to braise a short rib, now we can take just a few dollar a pound dish and create a premium recipe out of that with a little bit of skill and some of the talents that we've learned from the kitchen and the recipes that we've provided in this class. Another one would be imperfect produce. And so, here I have a box of lettuce, and this lettuce came through our kitchens as a donation, and it came through because it just had a slight little bit of wilting on the corners of some of these greens. So we would call this like imperfect produce. Well, as chefs, we can go through, we can wash this lettuce, we can take the time to pick out anything that's maybe got a little bit of an imperfection that we wouldn't want to serve, but still utilize a bunch of the product that's in there. So this would be sort of an example of a product that was, maybe just not quite perfect enough to serve in a restaurant or in a grocery store, but with a little bit of work and sort of going through these items, we can just make it a great solution. And typically you'll see these at a discount at the grocery store, and that little bit of effort from cleaning the product will show itself in our total cost of goods when we get there. The other one is meal prep. So if we're producing the items ourselves, we're typically going to save more money. So the more production you do, the less pre-prepared items, whether it's like a macaroni and cheese from the grocery store, or we talked about those pre-marinated meats, the less of those items that we're bringing into our recipes or our meal prep at home, the more money that we can save. The more money that we can save from our budget perspective, the more kind of fun we can have when we're out there shopping for our fruits, vegetables, and proteins. The next one, and this is kind of a big one, is bulk prep. So again, in lesson 6, we talked about making sure that we have all of our production from an ordering perspective taken care of for the entire week. Well, if we know the meal prep that we're going to do, even at home or in a kitchen like this one, if we know what we're going to do well in advance, we can also produce, in some cases well in advance. And so doing these items in bulk typically produces less waste, and we can sort of be a little bit smarter about how we're spending our money because we're utilizing the same ingredients. Which kind of brings me to the last one, and that's cross-utilization. So if we have, say, this one kiwi, or maybe even this togarashi spice. If we have this togarashi spice and it's only in one of our recipes for the week, I might have to go out and buy, say, just this one jar of togarashi spice, but I only need that one recipe. So does that make sense for me to go out and spend, this $4 or $5 on this one jar when maybe I've got another spice that I could sub in the kitchen in my spice cabinet that might make a little bit more sense from a cost perspective? So that would be sort of an example of what we would call a one-fer in the kitchen. It's only on one of our recipes or one of our production lists for the week. Whereas, if we're being good stewards and we had this, beautiful Swiss chard, or maybe these red potatoes, we might want to write red potatoes in on our recipes or our production a few times throughout the week. And we, as chefs, can find creative ways to continually use these items, and we want to make sure that we have less one-fers on our menu. We do more bulk production, and that will, at the end of the day, equal less waste. So to kind of recap, we talked about some of the things that we can do to create recipes that are more centered around health and wellness, what kind of items that we can use, what kind of items do we want to lean into, and potentially what kind of items do we want to avoid if we have certain food allergies or dietetic needs. The next thing we talked about was cost-effective recipes. And so what kind of things can we do from all of the other lessons that we learned, as well as from a recipe perspective, in order to make these recipes more efficient. Now the challenge for you guys today in our Kitchen Senses daily demo is to take these concepts and create a balanced menu with $5 per person or less cost of goods. I'd ask that you guys create a prep list, and again, we track the production and the food waste utilizing our Trim Senses tools. And so we've got $5 to use. You can use up some of the stuff that's already in the kitchens, or we might even have a little mystery basket for you guys. But the challenge is you've got $5. Let's see what kind of balanced meal and what kind of ideas we can put together, such as maybe having a little bit more of an inexpensive grain or inexpensive potato paired with maybe a nice premium protein like a flank steak or something like that. So excited to see what you guys come up with. Enjoy the challenge, and we'll catch up again soon. Take care.